Hi everyone, and welcome to the Disco Ball Discourse. I gave her a little spin right now. You should see the whole setup of how I have this hanging from my ceiling fan. It's pretty funny, but it works for me. My son likes to watch podcasts, and he is a good source of information for me. And so he told me at first, I was trying to get the disco balls that are up above my bed in here, and he was like, Mom, I think you should bring it in a little. So I brought it in a little. I turned on the ring light this time, so we're already doing good. Okay, so tonight I wanted to, because this is at night, this is a late podcast. I don't know if that makes a difference or if you can tell. I've just had like a long, sleepy, lazy day, and I was like, get it together. Okay, you can't just be sleepy all day and then be sleepy to the end. So I was like, what would really excite me? A podcast. What else would really excite me? And this is going to be the title or the subject for today, which is true crime. Exciting. I've had some comments on this. Why would that be exciting? Why is that something that people are interested in? And I did a little bit of research on that. The reason people can be interested in true crime is for a lot of reasons. And some of them are like just the mystery aspect and the problem solving, like critical thinking and problem solving of it all. But for me, especially because I am a woman, I feel like I have a particular interest in it. And this is only my opinion. For me and myself, I like to see into things and behind things and try to analyze. And the reason why I think that is because I'm kind of a trusting, aloof kind of person for the most part. And so I won't see the plainest thing in front of someone's face. I'm not aware of a lot of red flags or danger or anything like that. And I think that's not good. And so as I've gotten older, there's been a level of interest for true crime. It's so engaging. You feel so bad. These are real people. These are things happening to them. So I have the compassion. I want to solve the mystery, but I think for me personally, the biggest thing is that I want to see what's behind it. What red flags should you look for? What kind of things should you be preparing yourself for and looking into? And I guess that's the most interesting because I'm going to talk about a few cases here that are of my particular interest and still are solved or unsolved. And let me see, wait, I think they're all, okay, one's unsolved. Because I just want to see what to look for. People, relationships, things like that. And so let's just kind of get into some of the ones that, this is a real big reason that I've even been into podcasting is because most of the podcasts that I follow are true crime. And it's those people that I follow a lot. I do like the suspense and the intrigue and everything that goes with it. But at the end of the day, I'm still a human being and I have compassion behind that. It's not like, oh, neat story. Because there's people who write fiction novels and things like that all the time. And so, I mean, there's no lack of exciting things that you can read or get information on or get into in the way of a story. And so these are true stories and it's stuff that I think about a lot. I guess I wanted to start with some of the particular cases, and these I've done 5 in particular that are of big interest to me. And I'm going to have to skim so quickly over these to not make this 5 hours long because I have a lot to say about a lot of them. I've watched tons of podcasts about every single one of these things because I'm just thinking, we have limited information, or what's the other angle? What can you look for? How can we find maybe the killer and, avoid these kind of things? So I'll just go off of kind of one of the first ones. Before the age of podcasts and even social media on the level that it is now, this is a really old case that I would say that was of particular interest, and I'll kind of tell you why. And this is the disappearance of Laci Peterson. This happened in December of 2002. This was initially when Laci disappeared. And the reason this was kind of a touching big deal even from back then was because I've always lived in Texas. I've always lived in the same hometown and close to family. Well, during my first marriage, we spent almost 2 years living in his home state, in his hometown in Idaho. And so when I was away, this was a big case, and it was particularly hard for myself and for my mom because it was all over the news. It was everywhere. She was a missing young pregnant mom, pregnant with her first child. And the biggest interest, or the thing that pulled at our heartstrings the most, was that the baby she was pregnant with, because she was due very soon, was already named, and his name was Connor. And that is the name of my oldest child. My oldest child at the time was about 1.5 years. And so the distance, my parents missing him, us being away, that being my baby that I'm looking at, just really made me feel very involved in this case. And so if you don't know much about it, I'm going to super summarize it. Laci Peterson, like I said, young woman, mom, married. This was in December. She went to a Christmas party and then was getting things ready for Christmas Eve. And Christmas Eve morning, her husband calls the parents, "Hey, have you seen Laci? We haven't seen her. She's reported missing." There's this huge mystery going around all of this. And I can't remember exactly how long later her body and the baby's body were found separate in a body of water near them. This is in California. And they had been murdered. Obviously, I mean, she didn't go for a walk and drown, but a lot was surrounding this case, and the key suspect at the time was her husband, Scott Peterson. He exhibited a lot of very unusual behavior during the whole thing. He did have a mistress at the time who didn't know anything about what was going on, that he had a whole wife and a family and everything. You know, it was a lot easier to remain under the radar in the early 2000s like that, because you didn't have, Facebook and your Snapchat and all the social media where it would show, your relationships and family and things like that. So, not even saying that having something like a mistress means you're obviously guilty of murder. I'm not saying that. There's people who just do that every day and they go, "Hey, you know what? I want a divorce, bye." So that's not a reason to think he was guilty, but he was very, he did TV interviews, one with Barbara Walters that was really weird, a lot of fake crying. Whenever he was being interviewed, otherwise he wasn't very upset. And you see videos of people and their families just, they can barely get the words out. "They're missing, we can't find them, please help us." And he just seemed a little off. And he started to do different things. Like as soon as he was able to go home and get back in his house before there was an arrest, he went and he just cleaned out the baby's room, and instead of a baby's room, he made it a storage room. And he seemed to be very fine with being alone. And it's found out later, because the mistress starts catching wind through TV news that things may be going on, and so she links up with the police department, records some phone calls, and he calls his mistress New Year's Eve, saying, "Oh, we're breaking up, and hey, can you hear me? And I'm at the Eiffel Tower, and it's amazing and it's beautiful," when he is in fact at the candlelight vigil for his wife in California. So there were things like that. He also was caught. He kind of did, not bleached his hair, but kind of the sun-in orangey blonde, grew out a goatee, took his brother's driver's license, and was trying to cross the border into Mexico with several thousands of dollars in cash and camping gear. I don't know. Call that what you want to. That sounds a little fishy to me. He was eventually arrested, taken to trial, and he was convicted of first-degree murder. A lot of things that pointed in that direction, nothing directly, and never a confession. And so that case in particular, backwards and forwards, because it wasn't truly solved, there's not really hard evidence, has always been something of interest to me, because how did he do it? All the fishy things that he did, still there wasn't something very concrete. And, it came out of the blue for her. She thought they were married, they're living their life, they're going to have their first baby. Why did it happen? Why to her? Why to his pregnant wife? So lots of things around that. I know I said that was the short version, and it is. There's been a lot in the news even recently of, there's a whole group of people that want to release him. They want a retrial. They want all of these things. And, he's aging, 25 years in prison. I can't do math. Close. Whatever. So that one is of very particular interest, and I would say one of the first ones that was very interesting to me, because it was so long ago, and you just really couldn't grab the bits of information like you can now. So that's why so many YouTubers and people who do things about the case still cover it, and cover it a lot in many different angles, because now we're getting, different bits of information. When it's just the news and you just watch it on TV live when it happens, or there's the, Barbara Walters interview, you can only take those things and then go. Not that it's the public's business, until at some point the public maybe could help in identifying something and finding someone. And so that's why I feel like, as a public person of the public that I like to have this information. I don't know that I can do anything. Maybe I'm just going to sit up at night and worry about it. Not particularly worry, but maybe like pray for the families and think about what they've been through and just look for red flags for people in my life. So Laci Peterson missing, Scott Peterson, her husband, arrested in prison. I'm not sure of his sentence. I didn't really look that far. But I'll go on to another one because I'll ramble about just one of them forever. And I'm trying to keep an eye on my time here just because I will ramble. The next one that I just wrote down, this is really in no particular order, except for the last one. I made her last on purpose. But this one here is the disappearance and killing, not a murder because they didn't really, it was unsolved, of Caylee Anthony. And she was, I believe, 2 years old. And the person arrested in this case and who was responsible for her was her mother, Caylee Anthony. She was in her early 20s, had baby Caylee, and she was estranged from her family, kind of back and forth. The pregnancy wasn't planned. She still had, that early 20s to live her life and everything. And she kind of went away from her parents who loved the baby girl so much and were involved in her life. And she went away for a month or 6 weeks, something like that. And when she came back, the mom was like, I've been trying to get a hold of you. I wanted to see Caylee, where is she? And she's like, you know what? The babysitter kidnapped her. And she took her, and she's like, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, it's been like a month. And she's like, why wouldn't you tell us anything? And she's like, well, I mean, I was just going to figure it out myself. All at the time where they do find pictures and things online. I think it was MySpace at the time where she's partying and she's in bars because she worked there, and she's just having, all these like bar contests and having a blast, all while her daughter's missing. And then her mom called 911 immediately because she said, where's my baby girl, my grandbaby? And she said she went to Casey's car, and the car, this is literally on the 911 call, the mother said her car smells like death and my granddaughter is missing. So they actually, go on this wild goose chase to look for this babysitter who they claimed, or who Casey claimed had kidnapped her daughter. And so Casey used to work for Disney World in some way. So this was in Florida. And so when the police questioned her, they're like, well, let's retrace, let's go, let's talk to people, let's do all these things. And at one point, she took them to Disney World to meet with her employer and to go to her offices because, I don't know, they have to explore everything. And so she's like, we'll just go there. And so she takes them, they drive in, they get to the front gate, and he's like, yeah, I don't have you as an employee here. And she's like, oh, you silly, just call so-and-so, some name I guess she had thought of from the past, and just call this person. And so they get on the property, they get in this place, they get into the offices, and they're like, all right, well, let's go to your office, or let's go and talk to whoever. And she starts leading them all around these offices, finally going to a dead end. And she's like, okay, yeah, like, actually, I don't work here. Like, I did, but I don't anymore. And like, oopsie. And they were like, you can't do that. What are you doing? This is a case of something that's very serious. What are you doing? And so in the end, they're, Caylee, it's hard, Casey, the mom, Caylee, the baby girl, who, I mean, she's 2, I call her a baby. She was eventually found a couple of miles from the parents' house where Casey, the mom, would live off and on when she needed to. And she was found just in some brush by like a electrical worker or somebody who stopped to pull over for something, finds the girl's body. There's duct tape, there's all sorts of things. So, she didn't wander off as an innocent little girl from her grandparents' house where she wasn't even at and then end up there. So the case, is murder. And they brought in Caylee Anthony, the mother, and, she was put under arrest for a short time. And the reason I say that is because her case was a really big deal, because as it went to court, she was found not guilty of first-degree murder. There was not enough evidence to convict her in that. And she served a small amount of time in jail for a misdemeanor, which was just giving false information. At one point, she had even taken the police over to the apartment of this babysitter that she said that she had, and they were like, okay, well, take us to her apartment, where did you drop her off? And she took her to an old apartment complex somewhere, and they're like, which one? And she's like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. So she just kept doing that. And you can't do that in a case. You can't lie to the police like that. You can't take them on a wild goose chase. You're wasting resources. You're making people upset. Why are you lying? There was just so much around it. So they could only keep her in jail for a small amount of time, and only for what they had, which was false information. Still bad. Still a crime. Daughter's still gone. To this day, it has not been, it's not really solved. I don't want to call it a cold case. They found the child, and it's over, and it was obviously a murder, but they don't really have anyone to put that on. And recently, I think it was a documentary on Hulu. It may have already been last year by this time, but she came back with another really sensational story, and trying to tell her side. And really, instead of telling her side and being a sad mother, which she tried to act or portray, in my opinion, she just kind of was thinking of ways to like make herself seem like, why would it be me? And my life's been so hard, and I think of her every day, and you don't know how hard life is, and just very much narcissistic and just about her. And so it's just a really sad case. I think about that all the time. What would cause a mother to do any of those things? And just the case in general, it's just one that really sits in the back of my mind, because I think, no baby girl deserves to go through something like that. So a very famous case, one of the other ones that I'm interested in for sure. I'll watch anything and everything that comes out about that forever. Who's to say that something like that can't be solved? People still aren't here, but for justice to be served is usually the best thing. And to not have people capable of lying, murder, out to affect other people. So that's also the case, or the interest for me. Okay, so the next one here, this is a big one, is the case of the murder of Shannan Watts. This is also known as like the the Watts family massacre, or I can't remember. People in the true crime arena come up with the greatest descriptive words for things that have gone on. And the reason I say that, I only mentioned Shannan's name, but the actual victims in this case are Shannan and her 3 children, her 2 little girls, and then her unborn child. So 4 victims, 1 family. The arrest was made to her husband, Chris Watts. This happened in August of 2018 when she and the kids went missing. And by November 5th of 2018, he was already in court, and he confessed to the murder solo, and was given 5 life sentences for first-degree murder. So he's not going anywhere, and he's not getting out. The part that struck me on this case was that, of course, she's a mother of young children. And the most interesting thing about it really is Chris Watts himself, because he was portrayed and looked like he lived his life as a very kind, innocent person, soft-spoken, all about his family. She was on Facebook a lot. They have a lot of their Facebook, I guess, lives and videos and photos. She was on all the time because she was doing some sort of work at home marketing business. I don't even want to say which one it was. I'm going to say the wrong one anyway. So they had patches, and they had like energy bars and things like that. And so that's what she did from home. 2 toddler little girls. I don't even think anyone was quite 5. I think they were really little. And then of course she was about 5.5 or 6 months pregnant with their baby boy. Oh man, I'm sorry. Sometimes you wonder why people are interested in things like this. It's because they're real people. It makes it real. And just when I said how pregnant she was, I immediately flashed. The compassion comes from somewhere real, and from somewhere that you really care about people. And my son and his wife are getting ready to have a baby. And I was just thinking of exactly the timeline of how pregnant she is. And it makes it personal. It makes it sad. And so is it the healthiest thing always to dive into some of these things? Not really. It brings up a lot of really sad thoughts, even though this wasn't my family. And I don't have to go at night, go to sleep thinking about them or anything, but you just really do. It becomes somewhat personal. I didn't think that was going to make me feel that way, but it did. And so sorry. The other girls' names, their toddlers were Celeste and Bella. And what happened was they're married, they're living in Colorado. They do live away from family. She had just been a month or 6 weeks or so prior visiting family. Her family and his both lived in South Carolina where they used to live. So she took the baby girls and, she's pregnant and they're just having this great time with family, going to the beach and having birthday parties and things like that. And she had a strained relationship with her mother-in-law on that side of the family. They didn't get along well. One of her daughters had a severe nut allergy and allergies to other things, and the mother-in-law wasn't being respectful of that and had something around the baby girl that could really have put her in the hospital or worse. And so they had a little falling out while they were there, not already being good in the first place. At the end of this vacation, her husband, Chris, was supposed to come up and visit them. He gets off the plane. He's there with them maybe for a week or so before they fly back. And because they have recorded texts and things like that between she and her friends, which is embarrassing and terrible to think, oh my gosh, something I'm texting my best friend that are my deepest feelings is going to be completely public someday. And so she's, saying the intimacy is not there. He wasn't nice. He didn't want to kiss her. They were already so strained during their time apart. And then here, he wasn't excited about the baby. He didn't want to do a gender reveal. He didn't want to do a baby shower. And, just all of these kind of really weird out of character things for him. So they get back from their trip and she immediately goes to a conference for the business that she works for. And so she's gone a few days, pregnant, goes with her friend who is obviously one of the best friends in the whole entire world. This woman is the reason that anyone was even found after all of this happened. But they go on this conference and then they come back and their plane got in pretty late. So they get in from the airport at around 2 a.m. And so the last visual anything that they have of Shannan Watts is walking into her house from her Ring doorbell camera, or her doorbell camera. I don't know what it is. This was 2018. I don't know. People had rings back then. And so she's walking in, she goes in, her friend drops her off, makes sure she gets in okay, and she drives away. So the story is she gets home. The next day, her friend comes to check on her, pick her up, whatever. They're women. And what are women, especially in business and everything, and friends and little kids and all the things you do? You're texting, you're calling, you're back and forth. This is a really good friend. And she wanted to check on Shannan that morning because Shannan had a doctor's appointment. She was kind of feeling not so great with the pregnancy this far along. She knew she needed to get checked out. And she also had, oh my goodness, I can't believe, you'd asked me 2 hours ago and I could have told you everything she had. Not lupus. I can't remember what it was she had, but she had underlying health conditions. So her pregnancy was high risk anyway, and she just wasn't feeling that great, besides her personal life not going that great. So she was going in that next morning to get checked, and the friend couldn't get a hold of her. And the friend went by her house to check on her and to see if she was okay before her appointment. She didn't make it to her appointment. She went to the doctor's office and said, has she been here? They're like, hey, this is medical. We can't release this. She's like, I'm just worried. She's not answering her phone. I can't find her at home. She's not answering the door. I'm here to look for her. Something's not right. So the friend goes over, calls the police, tries to do a wellness check. But because the husband is in town and fine, they're like, yeah, we're not going to break down a door or anything. So they call the husband, who finally gets there. And he is acting shady, very, very shady. He is just like a nervous wreck, doesn't want to make eye contact. He said, yeah, you can go in the house. Yeah, just a second. Opens the garage, goes in. It takes a really long time to come to the front door. So the body cam footage is released. And so it's available. I've seen it a million times. And so you watch the police officers go in, look through the house, question the friend who's like, look, this is her phone. This is her purse. These are the only shoes she wears because she's very pregnant. Her feet are swollen, so she only wears these shoes. They're by the front door. Here's all the medications she's supposed to take all the time. Everything's here. The keys are here. The car's here. The car seats are here. because the husband had said that she said, oh yeah, I'm going to go on a play date in the morning with friends, so me and the girls won't be here. She didn't leave like that. She didn't leave like that. Like that, it was just too fishy. And the best friend that had called the police and everything is just, I mean, she's a tearful, nervous wreck. She's investigating herself. She's making phone calls. She's calling the girl's parents. Have you heard from her? You know, what's going on? And the husband is just kind of looking at the floor, and he's on his phone, and he's just kind of shrug, and he just looks like a wreck. And so at one point, the police officers see a neighbor, or the neighbor is contacted in some way, and they said, hey, we've got cameras that we have to our driveway, if you want to review them and look and see if they've left or anything. So they're reviewing them live with the police officers standing in there in the neighbor's house. And the husband, Chris, is way a nervous wreck. And so he's nervous. They watch everything going on, kind of try to dissect the video from there. And then the police are like, yeah, you know what, Chris, you know, you can step out or go back home, and we'll come talk to you in a second, and we'll make another plan. And the neighbor's like, hey, something's not right. Something is not right. We've known that guy since they've lived here. He's never acted like that. Something is not right. And the police officer's like, well, I mean, you can understand the position he's in. His wife and children are missing. And he's like, I don't know. I've never seen him be like that. He is real nervous, like nervous, not worried about their safety or well-being. And so the guy said, I mean, I think something's wrong. Even this camera we have of him backing into his driveway and at 5 o'clock in the morning, putting things in his truck before he leaves, which he does normally do that. It's a work truck. He leaves early. He works for an oil company. And he said, that's not odd, but the fact that he backed into that driveway is completely odd. He never pulls his truck anywhere in his driveway, ever. And you know neighbors, you live in a neighborhood, your neighbors know if you have a dog, or you know that your kids are in school, or that you have a job and when you're home. I mean, it's just a neighborhood and it's close. And so the neighbor said, nah, something's up for sure. So they go back to the house. I think it's the day after. A news crew comes to talk to the husband, to Chris Watts, because in a lot of these cases, news crews want to be on top of things, let people know about it. If you've seen this person in the area, if you were grocery shopping next to her and saw her, then we can at least track her last time that she was seen, or her well-being, how far she could have gotten, did she look sick, you know, anything like that. So news crews do that. And at the same time, they offer the families what I think is a courtesy to be able to say, we're looking for her, we miss you, if you can see us, if you can hear us. Because even with, at the time of social media, I mean, you're going to hit all the platforms that you can. You're desperate. You don't know what to do. You want to make an action. And so the news crews come over to Chris Watts' house, and they meet out on his front porch. This is infamous as well as his interview, because it is so completely odd. It's odd, it's shocking, it's off-putting. I suggest you watch it. He just gives so many signs during this interview. Number one, never cries. Never, not a tear. He's doing the arm crossing, and he's kind of smiling when he talks. I mean, really, like, you catch the corners of his mouth up and smiles like a lot. He's like, oh man, I just want him to come back. Because that's how you would do it if someone you loved was missing. I just want him to come back. Okay. And then he would refer to them in the past tense. He wouldn't use their names, even the girls included. And so the whole interview was creepy, weird, off-putting. And then as they start to look into the case, the morning that everyone went missing, he had called a realtor to try to sell his house. And he had called the girls' school, like a little preschool that they went to. And he said they wouldn't be attending anymore. Why? Why? If this is a surprise to you, it comes out later that they did have an argument the night she got home. He called it an emotional conversation. It was an argument. And, the next day that they were missing. So I can't remember if it was a few days or a week. It was a really short period of time. He's been called into the police department so that the investigators can talk to him, and they administer a lie detector test. And he's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And so they do it. And this is all filmed as well, and released footage you can watch on YouTube or wherever. and he fails with flying colors. And so the woman, the detective investigator, I don't know what to call her technically, she's like, okay, so you failed and you knew it and we knew it. And so we know you're not telling the truth. And he's like, oh, but I am, like, I miss him and I don't know. And I just want him back. And all he has is just complete panic. And I just remember in that room, it's she and another detective. And she said, Chris, besides the fact that you've failed this miserably, you haven't shed a tear one time. Your wife and your little children are missing and you don't seem to care. And he's like, I mean, like, I'm worried and like, I hope everything's okay and I hope they're all right. I just want him back. And she's like, how are you not a tearful mess? I mean, it's just these signs and these red flags. And so eventually his dad flew in from across the country. He says, can I just talk to my dad? Like, can I just talk to my dad? You're asking me all these questions. I just want to talk to my dad. So his dad comes in the room, and his dad, I can't even imagine what he's going through. And he's like, I'm here, son. What happened? And he gives a partial confession. And I say partial because he doesn't let out all the details and he's kind of fuzzy on a lot of things, but he says he killed her, his wife. And then he said, because at first he said, well, she had done something to the girl, so I did the same thing to her. And the dad said, you strangled her, so she had killed the kids? He's like, yeah. So that's what they get out of him in questioning and everything, not the actual case. So when the police officers come back in, they're like, okay, get this off your chest. You've told us this much. Where are they? And he reveals the location. He works, like I said, for an oil company. So there's these oil tanks and there's different sites that he goes out to. And he says they're at this site. And they said, okay, well, we've got drone footage here and pictures. Show us where they are. And he said, she's here. I buried her here. And those 2 oil tanks, I put my daughters in there. It's sick. It's all sick. I don't care if he gave them all too many sleeping pills and they're dead. It's sick because it's murder. It's sick because it's your family. But the fact that he did something like that and then went to dispose of their bodies in the ways that he did, completely disgusting. I mean, the investigators and police officers and everyone who had to retrieve all of the bodies, severely traumatized. I mean, needed counseling for what they saw, which anybody in that area, firefighters, paramedics, anybody like that, I'm sure the absolute severe trauma that comes with the things that you see and have to deal with are just through the roof. And so they are able to make this huge plan to drain these oil tanks to get these bodies. And he goes, like I said, this is so short. Usually things like this are just on and on and on. He decides, that's it. I did it. I'm going to admit to it. He goes to court. They did take the death penalty off the table. I think it doesn't exist in Colorado anymore, which is where the murders took place. And so he wasn't given the death penalty, but he was given all of the 5 life sentences for first-degree murder. The real story he ends up telling in jail later. This is recorded. It's an audio. It's a bad one, but you can still get a hold of it. He says that what really happened is she came home from her trip. They had a fight. They're laying in bed fighting. He gets on top of her and he puts his hands around her and he squeezes and he strangles her. And he says that she did not fight back and was just looking into his eyes. So he kills her. He kills her, and since it's going to be early in the morning, he's going to be at work. He's trying to get to this work site so he can do this disposal, which is why it's assumed that it's premeditated, even though he's like, I don't know, I just lost it. I mean, just like I snapped. He rolls her up in the bed sheets, takes her downstairs, pulls his truck up, goes through the garage and puts her body in the truck. And then he goes to his girl's bedroom and he gets his daughters and he grabs them and their little blankies and he puts them in the back of the car. They said, is mommy okay? And he's like, just be quiet. They drive 30 to 45 minutes to this oil site. And then he says that he strangled the youngest one. She was 2, 3. I mean, so little. And when he did that, oh, this is so gross. I can't believe this. I've listened to years of podcasts about this, listening to other people talk about it, almost to the point where I'm like, I must be somewhat desensitized. I'm not, obviously not in honor of the loss of all these people's lives, I still have feelings and I really do care. So the other daughter, she's 4, maybe not even 5 yet. They're really close in age. She says, Daddy, are you going to do what you did to her, to me, talking about her sister? And then he proceeds to strangle her. And in her autopsy findings, the older one, because she was older and because she was last, they did find that she bit the inside of her mouth and struggled. I think that she had skin under her nails where she had struggled and scratched, that she did die fighting for her life. And as they read these things in court, because they did while he was there, boy, did he look like a sad, sad person in court, hanging his head and crying and all of the things. All of the things that I guess you would expect a normal person to do, but this isn't a normal person. This isn't a normal person. He described that after that, he took their bodies and he opened one lid and put one daughter in the oil and went to the next tank and went and got the other daughter and put her in there too, because I think he wanted those bodies to be undiscovered. And his wife, he actually took her pregnant body and he dug a very shallow grave for her there, so she's wrapped in the bed sheet. He put her in there and covered her up. I think he had plans to come back and do something else or something different. I mean, who knows? Who knows? And that's the thing. There's just so much who knows in this. He did also have a mistress. Like I said, mistresses, people cheating, whatever happens all the time. Doesn't mean you're going to murder people, but she was a driving factor behind him wanting to become a new single man. And that's the thing. He was a pretty mild-mannered guy. He was kind of a chubby guy for a long time. And so he had recently lost a lot of weight, been in the gym, got a better haircut. So he was looking a lot more attractive. This is somebody he knew from work. And so they had developed this relationship. He had been with her while his wife was out of town. So there was this heightened whole relationship and everything going on. But he really, really, really just wanted to be with her. And instead of getting a divorce like people do and just being a responsible co-parent, having a divorce under your belt or anything, he thought the only way that he could move on in his own life was to take all of theirs. And so it's sad. It's terrible. It makes you look at people and think, what do I really know about someone? And that hits deep, so you wouldn't think someone married for years, great father, just very present, would be capable of something like that. But you don't know, people have deep, dark feelings, apparently to the point where you could do something like that. And there's just things that you need to look for. I'm gonna check my time. Man, I don't know if I can even fit in these other two. I don't mean to talk so much about them. That family massacre is horrendous. It's terrible. They're people that I think about and even pray for. Like I said, I pray for these people who passed. I pray for their families. I pray that we can just all be more aware. And I think that's where it takes me when I look at these cases, is we should just be more aware. And even if it's not us and our surroundings and the relationships we have with people, which yes, obviously do that, but for others around us, had it not been for her best friend that was adamant that she went to the doctor and that she did these things and, she wasn't checking in on their business, she was going to jump through a window. I mean, that lady was putting in the effort, and had she not done that in such a timely manner, who knows what could have happened. And so we've just got to be aware of other people and our surroundings. So that's the Watts case in a nutshell. Can you imagine if I talked about this for a whole segment? I actually thought about that, about covering some of these cases in a whole segment. But you know what? I feel like the internet has been so good at covering things and telling the story. And what I'm doing is just telling the story. And even all the information I have isn't, the new things that come out are things that are uncovered, more about like Chris Watts's mistress, because she was very fishy. She might have been part of it. There's video, there's things, there's all sorts of stuff that comes up that brings different angles. I don't have different angles. I'm just a consumer of this information, and it's very intriguing to me. So I'm not covering them one by one because I don't know that I could do it enough justice, and I don't know that I'm bringing something new to the internet that you can't find in 1,000 different places from people who do this all the time. Big channels, big creators, people that I really look up to. I know I've got 2 more to cover here, but I'm going to talk about some of the people that I love. Stephanie Harlow. She tells all sorts of true crime cases, and she does Halloween, so she covers spooky true ghost hauntings and things like that. And she is part of another podcast called Crime Weekly, where she joins up with a former police officer, and they discuss these cases as well. The way they present the information, the storytelling, everything great. Also Bailey Sarian, who actually does Murder Mystery Makeup Mondays. And so she covers things like that, does amazing makeup, but she has a really great way of telling things. She has a different angle. You'll notice that everyone is a different storyteller, and they bring you the facts, but they bring it to you in a way that's very interesting. And those are 2 of my OGs. Those are 2 of my favorites that I really like to go to for murder mysteries or true crime. So those are the 2 I can think about right now. But man, have they covered this stuff. And I mean in like a million parts. And they've got the info, and they're great. So, okay, before I go 25 hours over what? I just don't want to make this uninteresting for anyone. I want this to be bite-sized information that you can consume and be interested enough in for a podcast. And I know there's 3-hour podcasts. I listen to them over a course of a really long time because I'll listen to them at work in bits and pieces when I have little bits of time, or if I'm driving or something. But I'm just trying to be interesting and give you information, not bore you to death. That's why there's a disco ball. Sometimes things aren't happy and shiny, and right now, that's what I have to bring to the table that's happy and shiny is this. So, okay, the next one, and I'll just go over this one a tiny little bit because the last one I do want to spend a little more time on, but this is the case of Gabby Petito. And I think this is I didn't look it up specifically. I think it's 2019. And the reason I relate that to it is because this murder happened in, just an important part of it. I think it was in Utah, the important part anyway. And the reason I say this is because my son had just come back from his mission from our church, and he was gone for a long time. And then after that, he was at home in Texas for a while, and then he decided to move to Utah with some of his friends, and I decided to move him up there. We packed up his car, the back seat, the trunk, everything we could fit in there, and just the 2 of us drove to move him to Utah. And it was one of the best trips I've ever had, hands down, period. It was just the 2 of us. We road trip together. We listened to podcasts like the ones I'm talking about, and we just had a great time. And I remember we made it a point to stop at places we'd never stopped before. And one of the places that we decided to hit and stop at was Moab, Utah. And I remember this very particular time because it was the summertime, and we went to Hole in the Rock first, and we had a great time there. Obviously, I talked about that on my last spooky podcast because it inspired my story. And then after that, we went into Moab, which is gorgeous, beautiful. I mean, if you don't know anything about southern Utah, I mean, the rock formations and everything are just so beautiful. It's a very orangey red. It's very unique. It's very distinct. And so we were driving by the national park there. We had stopped at a restaurant, and we're just listening and having a great time. And as we got through there, I drop him off in Utah. I stay, whatever, I fly home. Well, then we find out about this case and about when it took place. Gabby Petito and her boyfriend, I think fiance, I think they were engaged. They decided to do like a vlog. And what they did was they got like one of those vans that you can like have a bed and stuff in. So they lived in it, and they were traveling to different national parks and camping and doing things. And her channel was a vlog about things like that. She was on, Instagram and everything. And so they were traveling together. And the reason I say Moab, Utah is because they were pulled over in famous body cam footage now today because they were swerving on the road. They were in an argument. People had called the cops saying they were swerving. They could tell people were fighting. They pull him over. She's over here. He's over here. She's a crying mess. We got into an argument, and then I did swing at him, in the car because he was swinging at me. And, they're just having this domestic dispute, very obviously dangerous in a highly populated area right there in Moab. So it's daytime in Moab. You can see the background and everything, and the police are talking to them, and she's a crying mess. And she's like, I know I shouldn't do that. I was complaining about the way he put something away, and we just couldn't get along about this. And then I just started crying, and he hates when I start crying, and he hates when I get upset. And the guy's over there like, yeah, she's crazy. Like, yeah, like she just gets this way. And when she gets this way, I like just can't handle it. And he's just being so mean. And the Moab City police, I believe, they got a little bit of criticism because they're talking to this guy like, hey man, we know how girls are, or whatever. They, after the fact, people were judging them pretty harshly, saying, they were kind of talking to him like, hey, everything's cool. Well, they still did their job with the information that they had. They talked to her. They tried to settle her down. They said, you two cannot stay in the same place tonight. You can go somewhere and you can go somewhere. And I think that they made sure that Brian is his name. His name is Brian Laundrie. I have to bring up his name. You always don't know who to talk about in these cases sometimes, because you don't want the killer to be the famous one. It's almost like you want to make sure that the victim's name is remembered. And so that's why I refer to these usually by the victim's name, is because to me that's the most important. But a lot of times the killer takes the top billing because you remember them too. So his name's Brian Laundrie. They were ordered to stay apart. They did. They kind of talk things over. They get back together. They get back on their trip. They're headed out somewhere. And I actually haven't reviewed this one in a while, so I don't want to mess up or miss too much. But she usually checked in with her family a lot. She was 21, I believe. She was pretty young. And so her parents knew that she was on this trek with her boyfriend, and they would check in and she'd be like, we're at this park now, and we're at this place. And she always checked in, and she missed a check-in or two from her parents. They got concerned. Then some texts started coming through that they didn't sound like her, and they were very weird and vague. And it would just be like, we're here, no service, or tell so-and-so that we said this. And they're like, something's just not right. Well, I don't remember the period of time either, but Brian Laundrie ends up back in Florida with his parents without Gabby. And they're like, I don't know what they were really like. We weren't there. What do we know? But they say they were like, oh, where is she? And he's like, we got in a fight and stuff. And I was just like, I'm not going to deal with this. The thing is, he took the van that they lived in and he showed up with it there. It's not his. It's under her name. She owns it. It's all hers. So he shouldn't have done that. It was under her ownership. They're not finding any credit card activity from her. They're not finding any cell phone activity from her. They're not finding anything she's missing. It's all very weird. Brian and his family decide to go on this camping trip. So, because, people were already coming up to their house, and they were outside of the house, and what's going on, and TV cameras and everything, and this girl's missing, but your son's here, and what's going on. So what ends up happening is the family goes on this camping trip. His siblings and nieces and nephews and his parents. Well, then they come back, and then they said, well, Brian's not here anymore. He decided to go out in the woods on his own. He was just like, I just got to get out of here. So he takes off, and no one knows where he is. Brian is now also missing. Gabby's body is discovered at the last place that they were. I'm so ill prepared today because I just needed to get on and talk about this. So I don't even remember the location of where she's at in the national park. That's not funny. None of this is funny. I'm sorry. It's not funny. I'm funny because I'm like, let me just give you this info, and I give you no info. But they do find her body. She was strangled. She is dead. She's been dead for, I think, a couple of weeks at this point. And so, of course, now they're on the hunt. They're looking for Brian Laundrie, and he's nowhere to be found. Like, even Dog the Bounty Hunter was called to be in on this. Dog. They called it the Big Dog. And he was, advertising, talking to news media and everything, saying, we're going to find you. We're going to get you, and we're going to find you. So he went to this area in Florida, but it's very swampy over there. And so the police had searched in this area where his car was last found parked, and where the family had been camping before, and they tried to search and everything. They're like, the waters are actually too high right now. They're sorry for the cut. I ran out of space on my phone before, and this is going to be my third time to record this because it actually didn't record the second round that I just did. Sorry. Didn't mean to stop in the case there. We're going to get back to Brian Laundrie. They're doing the search in the swampy area. They have to close it off. and they have to stop because it's the season where it's a lot more dangerous. So they close the park, they close that section of the park, and they come back. I don't know if it's weeks or a month or something later, but they end up having to come back because the waters have receded a little bit and they can do more searching in the area that they think that he was at. So they open the park that day. His parents are there, and there is, what I don't really understand, is a huge crew of people, because it doesn't sound like there was a lot of people there. And anyway, so they're out and they're searching, and I don't even think they're out there very long. And guess who finds Brian's body? It's his dad. And his dad comes up on the body, and he's supposed to have someone with him. You're supposed to find something, stop, everybody, I see something over here, let's all come look at it, police officers or whatever, and get it recorded. Well, instead, Brian's dad reaches down and grabs, I think it's his backpack and some other things that he found. And then he was like, oh, hey, you know, person, whoever's close to me, come over here and look at this. But he actually did mess with the crime scene and touch things. I don't know if that's a dad thing and you just did it out of your head or whatever. There's a lot surrounding the case, thinking that Brian's parents knew everything. So some of the way the things line up is very fishy. I don't know. Yeah, my opinion is I have no idea. So they find his stuff. Brian has been passed away for a couple of weeks, and that's how they found him, was that the water did recede in this area that he was in. And as the autopsy shows, he does have a self-inflicted bullet wound in his head, so he did take his own life. The most important thing that came from that, besides finding Brian's body and stopping the search and all of the efforts of people looking for him, they found a notebook, and in it is written, I guess, a letter, journal entry or something, but the way it would be described is, I guess, Brian's confession. And it's not really great, and it's not really a confession. It sounds like all he's doing in writing this is making himself sound innocent. He claims that he had to go out in the woods and left like that because he couldn't live without her. And he just didn't want to live on the planet without her anymore. And so he doesn't really have a full confession of, we got in a fight and I killed her, and then I came back here, wanted to say goodbye to my parents. I didn't know what to do. And they had a lawyer involved very early on, like from the day Brian got home. So that's why people suspect the parents knew more about that. So what happened in the letter is that he does say, I loved her so much, I didn't want to live without her. And then he goes on to kind of tell the story of how she passed away. And what happened was, he said they were out at this national park and they're hiking and they're coming back for the night, and it gets really dark and it gets really cold and the temperature drops, and Gabby's just like, I feel terrible, and I'm cold and I'm freezing and I'm shivering and I just feel so bad. And then he's like, oh my goodness, what can I do for you? And that they were like, we had to make camp, we just had to stop, and I had to try to start a fire, and I was holding her tight and she was shivering. And I can't remember exactly if it's that he said he held her too tight and something happened, or no, this is where it's fishy too. He says, I just saw her suffering and I didn't know what to do, and I needed to do what she wanted, like to help her. Like, he makes it sound like he aided her in her wishes, which was to not be alive anymore because of her suffering. And they find out later where the location where her body was found, near this creek, was actually not far from where their van was parked, where they had all their supplies, where they could have slept warm and been safe. They could have had cell phone service, all of that. They were really not that far from it. So his confession, he confessed-ish, but it wasn't really a full confession. It wasn't truthful. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't. And her autopsy did show that she was strangled to death. And so strangulation, huge red flag. My attorney who took care of my divorce this last time is on TikTok, and she actually posted something. She does a lot of family law, and one of the things that she posted recently was about strangulation and people who are hurt or killed that way, or if there's any risk. And what she says is there's always a risk if it has to do with right here. If they're trying to take your air, strangle you, or take your breath in that way, that is the biggest red flag. This isn't, I'm mad, I pushed you, I broke your favorite plate, whatever it is. It's a huge red flag. And so if you know of anyone who is at risk for abuse in general, of course, say something, but anyone that you know that has experienced anything around strangulation or anything like that, their life could be in danger. And we're lucky to have that type of information, and that history has shown that those are the type of things that happened. It's dark. It's sad. It's how a lot of these people, these victims on this list, lost their lives. And so it's not something that's fun to talk about, but we've got to stick up for people. And yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained. My camera is almost out of storage. I'm going to get a new camera to be filming my podcast. And so I need to kind of get on that because I have so much on here and I'm losing so much storage and everything. But just to close this out, and I've already done this outro 3 times, so I hope this doesn't sound really silly coming out again, but being interested in true crime is a big thing for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Maybe it is for sensationalism or excitement. For me, it's not. It comes from a lot of different places. But have you ever heard of Comic-Con and the big interest that's around that? That's where people go to see comic book characters and the movies and the things and everything around it. And it covers a whole huge base, and they're huge everywhere when it happens. Well, there is also a crime con. So there is a huge base of people that are very interested in this and are interested in talking to the victims' families or former police officers, or I'm not actually even sure what all is included in CrimeCon, but I do know that one of the people who was covering the case, he's a news reporter of the next one that I'm going to do, he had to leave to go to CrimeCon because he was scheduled to speak with one of the victims' family members from the case that he was at, and they were reading the verdict, and he was like, I gotta be at both. And so he had a crew cover the verdict. He went to CrimeCon and covered this, and there's just more that comes from it. And it's not always about the victims and the case and the murder that happened itself. There's so much more that goes on from that. And so on my next episode, when I cover this one particular case, I'm going to talk about that because I'm still very involved in the aftermath, the family members and the people who speak on it after. They're raising awareness, they're supporting other people who have been through it. So there's a lot of good things that could come from true crime and covering these kind of things, but also in consuming it. I'm a big consumer of that, and I will continue to be. And it is so late. It is like 12 something right now, and I've recorded these pieces at the end a whole bunch of times. I'm so sorry for that, but thank you for joining the Disco Ball Discourse, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.